Happy Friday, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Rhode Island Latino News Opinion Plus. I'm Brian Spotty. This is our monthly series airing on Fridays. It is a space for our opinions where we talk about current events and questions that Latino community is curious about. Today, we are joined by Amelia Rose, Executive Director for Groundwork Rhode Island. Welcome, Amelia. Thank you for joining us this week on Rhode Island Latino News Opinion Plus.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. How are you doing?
Doing good.
Yeah, so thank you for joining us on Rhode Island Latino News. And we wanted to just jump in and by asking, how has the pandemic impacted the work that you do and the mission statement of Groundwork in Rhode Island?
Yeah. Well, so Groundwork Rhode Island's mission, we work kind of at the intersection of economic opportunity and environmental stewardship and environmental improvement. And so a lot of the work that we do is around job training, workforce development, employment programs, and employing people in the realms of landscaping, composting. We employ both youth and adults in our programs. And a lot of our work is outdoor work, and so COVID ended up not impacting us too bad. We had to postpone a few things that were indoors, like our job training program and some school-based education. But overall, all of our landscaping work got to kind of continue on as normal, pretty much normal, sort of, except for like supply chain issues and that sort of thing, and as well as our composting service. So we've been really lucky to have kind of be spared the worst of the pandemic in terms of how it's impacted small businesses and other nonprofits. But yeah, we've been one of the fortunate ones.
Thank you so much for that. And we wanted to ask, just like on following up with that, just by doing research on Groundwork, from previous stories just within Rhode Island, that we've noticed that there have been more immigrants settling in Rhode Island. And we wanted to ask, like, you as an organization, how have you been impacted or have been working with the rise in immigration and the way that it's impacted the communities that you serve?
Sure. And actually, I remembered one thing that I wanted to say about the pandemic, and it sort of ties into this. Because we work so much in Rhode Island's urban communities, the sort of more densely populated populations that, or communities that have a lot higher populations of immigrants, for sure. I think one of the things that the pandemic taught us is the importance of green space and the importance of creating new green space, maintaining green space, planting trees, and having spaces in our community that people can go to that outside of their home that are safe when there's a pandemic that impacts people when they're indoors. And so having outdoor spaces that are safe, that are clean, that are environmentally sustainable, green spaces is so important. And that's another kind of big lesson that we learned from through the pandemic. And a lot of our work is focused on communities that have high immigrant populations already. And all of the work that we do, we try to do in multiple languages whenever we're doing outreach, particularly in Spanish and English because of the populations that are in Rhode Island. And in particular, the three communities that we focus on the most: Providence, Pawtucket, and Central Falls. But we know that there's a lot more linguistic diversity than that, than just English and Spanish. And so some of our recent project that we did around tree planting in Pawtucket and Central Falls, we also did a lot of our outreach in Cape Verdean Creole with posters and brochures and other kinds of materials like that. And we try to sort of focus on whatever the needs are of that community, and how we can reach people the best, who are the best messengers, how do we partner with different community agencies and organizations that have already built relationships and trust with, especially with the immigrant community or immigrant communities, because there is so much diversity among the immigrant community and refugees and other communities. So partnering with other agencies that do provide social services, where like an example in Central Falls, Rhode Island, is Progreso Latino that works with a lot of Spanish-speaking residents, and we work with them. We collaborate with them a lot on outreach activities, education activities, and our job training program. They have an existing client base that trusts them, that works with them, that they go to. They go to Progreso all the time. for various services, and we can leverage that relationship with the nonprofit to build relationships with the individual residents as well. So that's one of our main models is partnership, is making sure that we're building relationships with lots of different partners that may also not they don't necessarily do anything having to do with the environment or even health issues, but we can be there. You know, Resso or the YMCA in Pawtucket, they wanted to build a garden on their property, and we built it for them. They could hire us to do that kind of thing, tree planting, whatever it is. So, so partnering with those types of agencies, and then another way that we've built relationships and trust with immigrant communities and others is through just individual community ambassadors. So we're able to hire an individual person who everybody knows, who's well known in the community, who is already doing things, and can help us reach people that we otherwise wouldn't reach, sort of non-traditional folks, to get a tree planted in their yard. We've done that in Pawtucket and Central Falls with one of our small businesses. We paid them stipends to help us to advertise our tree planting program. We work with city council members, so kind of official type people who can connect us with lots of community residents, but also with just individual residents who just happen to know everybody, kind of like mayors of the block, sort of people who have big social networks and can work through their personal network, or can just help us do the outreach and build the trust that way, like kind of right in the neighborhood.
No, thank you so much for that. That was really, really insightful. So going off of immigrant ambassadors, can you explain all the qualifications or what you're looking for, and what are the type of people? You mentioned that you try to look for people that are very well known with the community, but what other qualifications do you seek when trying to recruit people to fill in these positions as immigrant ambassadors to pursue the mission of the organization?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I don't know. I don't want to like say a particular set of qualifications other than just being really supportive, wanting to do positive change in the community, being someone who even if you're not, I mean, the person that we hired or that we paid a stipend to help us, she's really outgoing. She she works in the community garden that's in Central Falls. She has a sort of a network of her own. And she's just like willing to knock on anybody's door and ask, do you want a tree, or do you want to participate in this project? So I guess, we do need some outgoing people, but if you're introverted, that's okay too. Just people who are sort of passionate about helping the community and getting people involved in something that's going to help, make positive change.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And just going off of that, so within your website, you explained that one of the biggest targets that target communities that you try to support are your middle to low income communities. Can you explain some of the biggest challenges that you see that these type of communities face?
Sure. So in Rhode Island, the lower income communities are often, but not always, located in our urban communities or our cities. And in Rhode Island, we call them our core cities, that have higher poverty rates, that have more concentration of people of color. And there's just like compounding of lots of different kinds of issues that impact people in the communities that we serve. And environmental issues is one of those things. Worse air quality that leads to higher asthma rates, worse housing conditions that leads to lead poisoning, or to also high asthma rates or asthma triggers, more like polluting facilities that are concentrated in one area near where people live. So we call these communities environmental justice communities, or frontline communities that are closer to these kind of hazards, these environmental hazards, whether it's an asphalt processing facility or asphalt plant, or a scrap metal yard, or there's all sorts of things that people can live next to. In Rhode Island, the way that our history is with all the legacy of industry, textile mills and things along the rivers, a lot of the type of housing that people who are lower income live in is located in these communities that were formerly industrial, because it's three level homes where they're turned into apartments and that sort of thing. It's not like these single family homes in the suburbs. And so it's just, so there's a legacy of pollution as well. There's pollution, the brownfield sites is a term that's used a lot to describe these contaminated properties that have like legacy pollution. So there's just like a ton of different environmental issues compounded with a lot of the other sort of social and economic issues, lack of housing, lack of affordable housing, everything being, no childcare, the list is endless of like what all the issues that impact the folks that we are working with.
That absolutely makes sense. So going off of that, can you explain how educating the youth in these topics such as affordable housing and climate change and leadership, how important is it to educate the youth on these important topics that revolve around the Rhode Island, and what do you hope that they become in the future?
We work with high school students primarily with our Green Team Youth Program. It's a summer employment program, but we also do a year-round engagement and education with high school students. And a lot of times the high school students already know a lot about these issues. They know a lot about climate change already. It's like in their face all the time. And I think what the Green Team does is gives high school students the tools and the kind of practice in how to talk about certain issues, how to communicate and be ambassadors within their community, to their parents, to their peers, to littler, kids who are littler than them. If they end up going to college, if they, in their high school class, whatever, they can be ambassadors around environmental issues. And that's sort of the more what we do is giving them the tools. How do you do outreach? How do you knock on somebody's door and just ask them a question about the environment or about their home, or getting them engaged in something? These are really useful skills for all sorts of different reasons, but it's sort of like taking the things that you really care about, which all the youth who come into our program already sort of care about justice issues, or they care about their community, or they want to make a difference. And then how do you translate that into like action items and making people care, other people care, and how do you bring people along with you?
That absolutely makes sense. And just, going off of educating the youth and on important issues. So, within the last several years, we've seen that as a nation that we've struggled with the concepts of diversity, equity, and inclusivity. And since within your website, you say that that's something that you genuinely advocate for, can you explain more on what are the challenges that you've seen creating a culture that is very emphasis on diversity, equity, and inclusivity, and to make that culture be accepted?
Yeah, it's really hard to change the way things are. I think that initially, I don't know exactly how to frame it, but it's sort of like, how do we create openings in the way the different structures currently operate to allow for new voices and for new for youth to come up? Like, how do we create pipelines for kids to be in our Green Team, for example, and work with us in the summertime? But then also, do they get jobs with Groundwork? How do we keep them going and kind of building up their leadership and develop a structure that gives them more opportunity? There's a lot that goes into that, of having to, like educational attainment and helping people kind of in their own home lives, their own private lives. So people go through a lot of different things, and so how do we create those pipelines, those opportunities, and keep people within our network, and then let them kind of find their way to what it is that they're passionate about or that they want to do with their life. But I think it's being open to those opportunities. It's just on a practical level, things within our own staff, not requiring a person to have a college education as like a baseline requirement for being hired for a program position at our organization. That's a huge sort of structural thing that a lot of people who are young people of color in our communities can't afford to go to college, but they have a lot to offer. And so how can we create those opportunities and not kind of exclude people based on a bachelor's degree? uh, Things like that. How can, what are there policies, are there practices that you engage in that as an organization or then as a community, you have to kind of think about all these different levels of what are the ways that you're unintentionally being exclusionary, and not creating a culture of encouraging diversity. Even if you really care about it, there are ways that you just kind of end up through inertia. You just sort of end up replicating the same old thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for that. And we want to ask to top it all off is, what would you like our audience to know about Groundwork and how to get involved?
Yeah, I mean, we are a small community-based nonprofit organization. We love to have people get involved with our work. We are going to be planting tons of trees over the next few years in Providence, Pawtucket, Central Falls, Johnston, Cumberland, Lincoln, and Woonsocket, this kind of northern part of Rhode Island, and would love to get people involved in tree planting work, helping with watering and maintenance types of work. If we plant on their property. We do green stormwater infrastructure and installation. So that means things like rain gardens and swales and things that capture rainwater where it lands and getting it absorbed into the groundwater, so that it's not running off into our urban waterways. So that we're looking for those opportunities. Commercial properties. If there are commercial property owners in these Providence, Pawtucket, Central Falls sorts of areas, who are interested in adding green space and green stormwater infrastructure on their properties, we have grant funding for that. And we have our composting program, which is a service called Harvest Cycle. And we are always looking for people to sign up for Harvest Cycle. We have drop-off sites where people can drop off food scraps, or we can pick up from their home. So what Groundwork Rhode Island is really trying to do is create avenues, streams of income that support our organization and that we're able to employ people from the community, but also providing services that are benefiting the environment. And so they're called social ventures, and that's what our landscaping crew does. That all of our tree planting work, all our green stormwater infrastructure work, landscape maintenance, design work, and then our composting work the composting service is also another social venture. So that's sort of our model, so that we're creating revenue streams that help our organization, but then also provide that service to the community.
Thank you for talking with us, Amelia, and for being our guest on Rhode Island Latino News Opinion Plus. Join us next time for another episode. For more information about our discussion today, check out our website at RhodeIslandLatinoNews.com. Follow us on Twitter at RILN Latino News. I'm Brian Zapata with Rhode Island Latino News Opinion Plus, and we'll see you next time.